This isn't on. Now we'll try it. Welcome to the induction ceremony for the 35th Division Hall of Fame, classes 2020 and 2021. We want to welcome all the families of these deserving inductees, all the members of the currently serving 35th Division that are here, and all guests. We thank you for being with us. This is being Zoomed, and it's also on Facebook Live, so we thank those involved in that. And before I forget, I want to thank the 35th Division Band for being here and for being a part of our ceremony today. Thank you very much. Fritz Garb, all Major General William Blaylock, the Commander, 35th Infantry Division. General Blaylock, right back there. State, we have Colonel Jeff Lanning, the Executive Secretary, 35th Division Association, Colonel Steve Pierce, Colonel Bob Bloomquist, who's the Treasurer, Lieutenant Colonel Ron Boyer, who's the President of the 35th Division Association, and Chaplain Potter. At this point, we will ask you to stand for the national anthem. Thank you. Please remain standing for the invocation given by Chaplain John Potter, 35th Infantry Division Chaplain.
Please bow with me in prayer. Gracious God, we give thanks for the day and the opportunity to come together and to focus on a time of service. We give thanks especially for those who focus on nation, on state, and community. Those who have lived life as servants, people who have raised their hand to go forward, also people who would sacrifice, people who would live, people who would fight, people who would, again, give life if necessary. In Scripture, we see these examples as King David's stories of mighty men of valor. Today, we recognize mighty soldiers of valor from the 35th Infantry Division. We give thanks for their opportunities, their stories, and their heroism. May we continue to be reminded of, again, the grace, the mercy, and the commitment that comes from this time of service. These things we ask in your holy name. Amen. Amen. Please be seated.
One more introduction that I forgot. Colonel Paul Waters over here, who's our PowerPoint man today. He's the Vice President of the 35th Division Association. I do not believe that we have any inductees from previous Hall of Fame classes or relatives here. If they are, please raise your hand. I don't want to miss anybody, but this is our 12th and 13th induction to the Hall of Fame. At this point, then, we're ready to proceed with the induction, and our first inductee is Major William M. Denney. And the procedure will be, we'll read the bio, then we'll call the family up. Colonel Boyer will provide the certificate and things, and this will give a chance for you to introduce your family members present and to say a few words.
Major William P. Denny, a native of St. Louis, Missouri, received the Silver Star, Purple Heart, Bronze Star with 2 oak leaf clusters, Presidential Unit Citation with oak leaf cluster, European Theater of Operations Campaign Medal with 4 Bronze Stars, the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the American Defense Medal, the American Campaign Medal, the World War II Victory Medal, and the Belgian Croix de Guerre with Palm for heroic World War II combat service with Company C, 134th Infantry Regiment. He was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. He enlisted in the Missouri National Guard's 138th Infantry Regiment in 1938. When his unit was activated in December of 1940, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant, serving as a range officer, transportation officer, and battalion S4 in various units of the 34th or 35th Infantry Division. He completed rifle and heavy weapons school at Fort Benning, Georgia in June of 1941 and graduated from the United States Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas in November of 1942. Captain Denny was then assigned as the S4 of the 140th Infantry Regiment at Camp Hausa, Texas, where the 35th Division was training for combat to join the fight in World War II. In August 1944, Captain Denny deployed to the European theater and was given command of Company C, 134th Infantry Regiment as it fought its way towards Germany. During the next 4 months, Captain Denny led his company across France and Belgium and into Germany. Under his leadership, Company C conducted dangerous river crossings, successfully executed surprise attacks on German positions, and won pitched battles against superior forces. On November 14th and 15th, 1944, Company C was in the battle to capture the town of Morhange, France. After 36 hours of fighting, he had captured the town and repulsed the German counterattack. Although Captain Denny had been at the head of his men during the entire battle, he went without rest to reorganize his unit, personally visiting every defensive position and encouraging each man to stay strong and alert throughout the night. Because of his leadership, the company was able to repulse another enemy counterattack the next morning and continue its advance. For these actions, Captain Denny was awarded the Bronze Star for his heroic service, dynamic leadership, and devotion to duty. In early December 1944, Company C was tasked to be one of the lead units to cross the Moderbach River and conduct a surprise attack on the town of Coutelange, France. On the night prior to the planned attack, Captain Denny made a personal reconnaissance of the river to select the best crossing points and then supervised the construction of footbridges. The next morning, he led his men across the river and into the town without a single casualty. They then captured several enemy machine gun positions, which the unsuspecting enemy had left unmanned, and then continued into the town where they captured 110 members of the SS Elite Guard. For this action, Captain Denny was awarded his second Bronze Star, which cited his brilliant leadership and skill in surprising hostile forces. Approximately 1 week later, Company C was selected to lead an attack across the Blees River into Germany and establish a bridgehead at Hopkirchen. Again, they were able to make the river crossing undetected and capture 2 fortified positions and 67 Germans without a fight. However, as they moved into the town, the now alerted Germans put up heavy resistance, launching several counterattacks and severely disrupting the flow of reinforcements and supplies that had to cross the Blees River. For the next 2 days, Company C and the remains of Company B fought off in direct fire, house-to-house fighting to maintain a narrow toehold on German soil. Third day, 2 battalions of the 134th were able to fight their way into Hauptkirchen and capture the town. For these actions, Company C was awarded the Distinguished Unit Citation, and Captain Denny was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action. After the Germans had begun their final major counterattack in December 1944, called the Battle of the Bulge, the 134th Infantry Regiment including Captain Denny and his Company C, were fighting their way north to release the 101st Airborne Division, which was trapped at Bastogne, Belgium. Near the town of Loutrebois, about 2 miles south of Bastogne, Company C ran into large forces of the German army. On the morning of January 4th, 1945, Company C was part of an attack towards the German positions near Seytaz. Moving under the cover of dense fog, they again surprised the enemy and overran their outlying positions, capturing another 20 Germans. Captain Denny then continued the attack and penetrated the enemy lines, but ended up deep in enemy territory, surrounded by Germans. As night fell, Company C was ordered to attack the German lines from the rear near Loutrebois to support the 137th Infantry Regiment. Captain Denny reorganized his company and was leading them through the dark, snowy forest towards Loutrebois when they were attacked by an overwhelming German force. Although many of the men were able to escape and make their way back to friendly lines, Captain Denny, at the head of his troops, was captured. After being taken prisoner, Captain Denny was marched across Luxembourg to Hammelburg, Germany. Almost all the journey was on foot because the Germans were running out of vehicles. He spent the remaining months of the war as a POW in the Auflag 13B near Hammelburg. Prisoners at this camp suffered harsh conditions with starvation rations, no heat or running water, and cruel treatment by their German guards. Captain Denny lost 50 pounds in those 3 months under these conditions. He was liberated by American troops, but the first attempt on March 27th, called Operation Task Force Bound, failed, and many of the American POWs were killed or recaptured. After this attempt, their diet was reduced to practically nothing, and Captain Denny said that they would have starved had it not been for the Serbian POWs sharing their rations with the Americans. On April 6, 1942, they were finally liberated by the 14th Armored Division of the United States Army. Captain Denny was evacuated to various hospitals in France for several weeks, and then flown to Mayo General Hospital in Illinois for further treatment. Upon recovery from his wartime injuries, Captain Denny became commander of Company K, 2nd Regiment at Fort Ord, California, from October 1945 to June of 1946. He was then assigned as an S1 officer at Camp Stoneman, California, until September of 1946. Captain Denny was then assigned to the National Guard Bureau in Washington, D.C., and promoted to major. Due to his wartime injuries, he was medically retired in March of 1947. Upon his retirement, Major Denny remained active in the 35th Division Association and the 35th Division Reunion Corporation when it planned and executed the 1950 reunion, which featured President Harry Truman as its honored guest. Major Denny married his wife, Anna Mae, in 1941, and together they had 8 children. Mrs. Denny passed away in 2010, and 7 of the children are still alive. Major William M. Denny passed away on September 20th, 1999.
We now ask Denny's to come forward. His son is right here, and we'll let do the presentation.
I promise 2 minutes here. I'm Ryan Denney, the second son. Denny there, he's not there now. But we went over to Fort Leavenworth this morning because my dad had gone to Command and Staff College there in 1942, and my older brother was born there. So fast forward many years, 1978, I'm Command and Staff College as an Air Force exchange guy, hostage at Leavenworth, and married my wife, and our first son was born there at Fort Leavenworth. So comes a big full circle. My dad would have been very, very, very proud to get this recognition because it comes from his old Army guys. He didn't talk much about World War II or his combat or his capture time to us at all as we were growing up. Most of the stuff that he has heard was read. Things I dug out of some old newspaper articles and the citations for his different wars after he had died. So I know he didn't talk about it because he was busy doing other things. He had other battles to fight. 8 kids that we had. My older brother and I were born before he went off to combat, and the other 6 came along afterwards. So they were very busy. My parents were very busy the whole time. Like I said, it wasn't like they died. I actually kind of dug in there and found all this stuff. But I will tell you about my family. My entire family thanks you all for presenting this award, this recognition to him, and preserving his actions and his name for future generations of not just our family, but also the 35th ID. Thank you very much.
Our next inductee takes us back to World War I, Captain Dr. Otto L.H. Hine.
Captain Dr. Otto L.H. Hine received the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in action while serving with the Medical Detachment, 139th Infantry Regiment, 35th Infantry Division at Chaudron Farm, France during World War I. A native of Oklahoma, Captain Hine's family moved from Oklahoma City to Muskogee in 1911, where he graduated from Central High School. He then went to dental school in Kansas City, Missouri, and after graduation returned to Muskogee, Oklahoma, to start a dental practice. When the United States declared war on Germany on April 6, 1917, Dr. Hine volunteered for military service in the U.S. Army 10 days later. He was assigned to the dental reserves with the rank of first lieutenant and was soon sent overseas to France. He served in several hospitals behind the trenches in France, and then with the Medical Detachment, 139th Infantry Regiment, 35th Infantry Division. On September 29, 1918, First Lieutenant Hine followed the advancing 139th Infantry in the no man's land during the Meuse-Argonne offensive. His job was to supervise a field aid station at the front line near Chaudron Farm in the Argonne region. The aid station was soon filled with 94 patients. Here, wounded soldiers received basic treatment before being sent to the hospital behind the lines. 139th Infantry was taking heavy enemy fire to include artillery with mustard gas. The aid station was informed that the 139th Infantry was going to withdraw, leaving the aid station out in front of the new line of defense and only 25 infantrymen to protect the aid station. As the withdrawal began, the aid station became the focus of German artillery. Until it could be evacuated, it would be exposed and vulnerable in the no man's land between the 139th Infantry and the German forces. At 0200 hours on September 30th, 1918, at great personal risk, First Lieutenant Hine made his way back to the new line of defense of the 139th Infantry to report that the aid station was still in the middle of the fight. He requested artillery fire from the 129th Field Artillery to prevent the Germans from running the aid station. Upon returning to the aid station, First Lieutenant Hine started the evacuation of the wounded with the 129th Field Artillery firing their rounds to cover the evacuation. The artillery barrage lasted 9 hours. With only 7 litters to carry those who could not walk, Hine and his men at the aid station worked for hours to cover of night as German artillery rained down on them. By the next day, all 94 wounded soldiers were safely evacuated back to the 139th Infantry lines. First Lieutenant Hine had to be treated at the new aid station for having breathed mustard gas while he worked to put gas masks on the wounded. His words tell the story of his request for artillery support to protect him in the evacuation of his patients. At the 70th Brigade headquarters, I met an artillery lieutenant, and he gave me the promise of a barrage over the aid station and across the road about 25 to 50 yards in front of it. The barrage was to start at 0430 on 30 September. I left the observation post at Valmy and returned to the farm, the aid station, and withdrew the infantry protection just as the first shells of the barrage whistled over. The barrage continued until about 1330 hours when I left the aid station to accelerate the action of the litter bearers. The evacuation was soon completed, and I did not need to return to the aid station. The barrage was well laid and absolutely effective. When World War I ended on November 11th, 1918, First Lieutenant Hine returned from France and was stationed at Fort Beard, New Mexico. He was promoted to captain, and on July 9th, 1919, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his great personal risk in combat and saving the lives of 94 35th Infantry Division wounded soldiers under his care. The citation for the Distinguished Service Cross reads in part, upon his own initiative, Captain Hine went to a dressing station in advance of the line after the infantry had withdrawn and worked under heavy bombardment of gas and high explosive shells, dressing the patients and directing their evacuation. That night, he returned to our line through heavy artillery and machine gun fire to arrange for ambulances and litters. Later, he made another trip to the rear for the purpose of securing an artillery barrage to protect his dressing station. Through his exceptional courage and energy, all the wounded men were safely evacuated. After the war, Captain Hine returned to Muskogee, Oklahoma to resume his dental practice and serve his patients until his death in 1962.
Thank you, and we'd ask the Hine family to come forward with presentations.
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, for the nomination, for recognizing what Dad did a little over 100 years ago. He spoke very little of what he did in the war during World War I, but one thing I do remember him saying is that several years after the war, someone would show up in his reception room and come long distances and with tears in their eyes would embrace him and thank him for saving their life. And I thought that was impressive. And that's what I remember most about today. And again, thank you so much for this, General Earhart, and all those that put this together for his nomination. Thank you very much.
Introduce your family.
Oh, yes, this is my daughter, Kim, and my son, Dr. Craig Hine.
Next inductee is Tech Sergeant Clarence T. Kemper.
I have the honor of reading the narrative on Tech Sergeant Clarence Kemper class of the Hall of Fame. He served as a platoon sergeant in Company M of the 137th Division, Camp Robinson, Arkansas, through the end of World War II, earning the Bronze Star Medal for his heroic leadership in La Barchance, Belgium, in 1945 during the Battle of the Bulge. He was also wounded twice and received 2 Purple Hearts. Now, Click was born September 26, 1918 in Oregon, one of 7 children. He attended the Visitation School and graduated from the Visitation High School in Vermont, Oregon community, where he spent most of his life. He was a ball player and attended Lefty Old Jules baseball school in San Francisco, California. He was drafted in the Army in 1940, and at 22, a full year before World War II began. He completed his basic combat at Camp Robinson, California, and then was sent to Company M, 137th Infantry Regiment at Camp Robinson, Arkansas. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, he went with his unit to California to guard the West Coast for an expected attack against the Japanese invasion. They guarded bridges, tunnels, railroad trestles, and the Douglas Aircraft Factory near Long Beach, California. At that time, he also became a member of the unit's baseball team. Continuing with this, the unit moved through San Luis Obispo, California, where it housed the famous San Francisco Cow Palace. Here they thought they were being sent to the Pacific Theater to fight the Japanese. But no, in 1942, they were sent to Camp Rucker, Alabama, and which participated in the famous Tennessee maneuvers. From there, they went to Camp Butner, North Carolina, then to West Virginia for mountain training, where they thought they were going to be sent to Italy. Wrong again. They were sent to Camp Kilmore, New Jersey, for embarkation to England and the European theater, transported on the Thomas H. Barry. Landing at Liverpool, England, they were soon involved for training in the upcoming hedgerow fighting. On the 5th of January, 1944, Click, now a machine gun squad leader, and his units crossed the English Channel at night on the Liberty boat Lou Gerin. Landing on Omaha Beach, they were sent immediately to begin their battles in the hedgerow of Normandy, France. The same day, he began losing his men from his squad and from Company M. Wounded by enemy shrapnel on the shoulder at St. Lo, France, the medic gave him shock pills, treated his wound, hung a strip of gauze on the back so the enemy would know that he was wounded, and then gave him a Purple Heart on the spot. Eventually, he got back to the 137th Battalion aid station and then sent to the field hospital. They took out the shrapnel, stitched him up, and in 2 weeks, he was back at the front to find his unit. Now he was in charge of 4 squads. Click led his men as fighting continued in Nancy, Sarreguemines, and across southern France. By Christmas, they were at Metz, France, before being sent north to assist at the relief of the famous Bastogne, Belgium, during the Battle of the Bulge. After a fierce battle at Liverchamps, Belgium, in January 1945, he was awarded the Bronze Star Medal. The citation reads, "For historic service in connection with military operations against the enemy of the United States in the vicinity of Liverchamps, Belgium, on January 2nd, 1945. With his heavy machine gun section supported by infantry attack, was subject to an enemy counterattack. This soldier remained at his post, firing his weapon until it jammed. He then withdrew and consolidated the position of his section with the rifle company. Accompanied by 2 companies, Tech Sergeant Kemper then went forward under fire to retrieve important equipment that had been left in the forward position. His courageous actions under fire are in accord with the highest military tradition." As they moved forward into Holland and then Germany, his machine guns were repeatedly set up in the very edges of the unit in the direct contact with the enemy so his units could continue to move forward. Often this was done at the edge of towns where there was little cover. Every day was a risk for survival. In his memoirs of the war, he said that one day I received a new replacement to my section. I told him where to dig in. Even before he got the hole dug, a mortar shell hit him and killed him. I got a splinter from that shell in the calf of my leg. I went to the aid station, they took it out, gave me another Purple Heart cluster, and then sent me back to the front lines. They crossed the Rhine from Holland into Germany, where they liberated a number of Polish prisoners being forced to work at a German sulfur plant. They reached a location near Hanover, Germany, where they went into the woods and shot a deer from a private German honey preserve and had the unit cook a fine, wonderful meal. He said that when Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, we were sent on a long hike because they didn't want us celebrating too much. However, that evening when we came back, there were several kegs of German beer in the mess hall for him. On occupation day and on occupation duty in several towns in Germany, he organized softball teams and tournaments in his spare time. He even got to take a trip to Paris, where he went to the fall. Because he had 105 points and 85 were needed to send home, a method of which they used to calculate folks' experience, he went to Le Havre, France, for eventual transport back home. Points at that time were earned for lengths of service, the battles he'd been involved in, the number of Purple Hearts, any special awards, Bronze Star, and others that he received during the Battle of the Bulge. Landing in Newport News, Virginia, he and his unit then traveled by train to St. Louis, Washington, and he was discharged. He said that the next day I rode a bus from Fort Lewis to Forest Grove, Oregon, my hometown. I felt lucky to get home alive.
Hall of Fame.
Didn't make it. It is said that
Hall of Fame. That's how it is. Idzie na bieżąco.
by Blanche Kemper.
Hall of Fame dla tych, no, tam gdzie ojciec tej był w brygadzie.
Began
To mi
raising.
przysłali ten shortcut.
Eventually had 3 children, James, Donald,
Teraz to siedzisz i oglądasz.
and for his supplemental income, he also worked outside the farm. First at a small farm, and then worked 2 years at General Tire. Flick had a real zest for life like no other. He enjoyed teaching and coaching his sons in youth baseball. He also enjoyed hunting, fishing, rock hounding, playing cards, and exchanging stories on his patio overlooking the stars. His wife, Blanche, passed away in February 2011, and Flick a little over a year later in April 2012. Following the memorial mass at the Visitation Catholic Church, he was buried next to his wife in the cemetery in Forest Grove, Oregon.
Thank you. We're pleased to have one of Flick's daughters, Michelle, and her family here, so come on up.
I'm Kemper's daughter, and this is my husband, Bill, parents, and our son.
I would like to thank Blanche Kemper. Without her work, we wouldn't be here because Click's story wouldn't have been told. He didn't speak about his war experiences until he got into his 80s, and Blanche drug it out of him session by session. And he would talk at length about his training in the United States at all these different camps. It was hard work. It was also fun, a lot of team building. But the sessions of delivering his experiences to his wife got shorter and shorter as they got over to Belgium, and they got harder and harder for him to describe. So I want to put a shout out to my mother-in-law, Blanche, who drug that story out of him. And unfortunately, and fortunately, we have a little bit of tape. I'd like to play 20 seconds of audio so you can hear the voice of Click Kemper as he's describing the transport across the Atlantic and how rough it was, and the zigzagging they had to do to get away from these submarines. I apologize in advance for the quality of the recording. It's going to come off my phone. It's only going to take 20 seconds. And he's talking about the submarines and the seasickness that he witnessed as they crossed the Atlantic. Can I use that microphone?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't know. My stomach is thrown as far as the rest of them. That's the humor of Click Kemper. What an amazing man. What an amazing 35th Division that you value, and these stories and these experiences and these heroes. And we thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for the class of 2021. Our first inductee is Bfc Keith and Bullock.
Private first class, Keith and Bullock served in frontline combat with 35th Infantry Division for 264 days and 1,600 combat miles during World War II. After World War II, he served as a proud member and leader in the 137th Infantry Regimental Association and the 35th Infantry Division Association, 1984 to 2008. The respect in which his fellow members of the Santa Fe Division held him resulted in a PFC's election as president of the 35th Division Association in 1998. the same year that Keith led 2 busloads of vets and wives on a battlefield tour in Europe and reunion in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, including Carlisle and Gettysburg. Keith earned battle stars for 5 European campaigns: Normandy, Northern France, Ardennes, Rhineland, and Central Europe. His responsibilities as a forward scout, S2, in Headquarters Company 137th Infantry Regiment included determining essential information such as location of automatic weapons, fortifications, wire entanglements, minefields, booby-trapped areas, field of fire through the woods, roadblocks, command posts, or indications of enemy improving their defense, or any flare of activity. Keith was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan on June 17, 1925. He was raised by devoted parents, Frank and Sam Fisher Bullock, their only child. He graduated from Kalamazoo Central High School in 1943. 10 days later, he answered his draft board's call, in spite of a lifelong heart murmur, which kept him off the track team. Following induction at Fort Custer, Michigan, and basic combat training at Fort Hood, Texas, where Keith was offered sniper school, he turned it down. Instead, he joined Headquarters Company, 2nd Battalion, 137th Infantry Regiment, 35th Infantry Division, as a forward scout at Camp Butler, North Carolina. From there, he participated in the West Virginia mountain maneuvers, which he enjoyed. Following a short stay at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, he sailed for England with the 137th Infantry Regiment on May 12, 1944. He entered hedgerow fighting in Europe with the second wave of the D-Day invasion on July 7, 1945. Participated in the liberation of St. Lo, the battles at Veer, Mortain, Laval, Le Mans, Orleans, Montargis, Sens, Troyes, Nancy, Moselle River, Gramercy Forest, Sarreguemines, and others. Christmas Day 1944 found his regiment in Metz, from which they were urgently directed north to help relieve Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. Fierce fighting around Surrey and Villers-Bonneau occupied the 137th from December 27, 1944 to January 11, 1945 against the SS Adolf Hitler Division and the 339th Nazi Infantry Regiment. Vigorous night patrols were conducted, resulting in heavy casualties. In Keith's own words, as an S2, I was constantly patrolling beyond our lines and did to the best of my ability my duties as a member of the 137th Infantry. Only twice were my kills one-on-one and personal. The rest involved calling on artillery and mortar fire and or observation of the crowds, reporting that information to my commander, Colonel George S. Tommy O'Connell, an officer whom Keith greatly admired. In the spring of 1945 found the division directed through Holland, the battles of Venlo, Maastricht, and Rheineberg, crossing the Rhine on a pontoon bridge and entering Germany. By April 15, 1944, the 35th Division was at the Elbe River, ordered to stop and allow the Russian troops to enter Berlin. He participated as a forward scout in 5 campaigns: Normandy, Northern France, the Ardennes, Rhineland, and Central Europe. During his time in the 137th, Keith was awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the Good Conduct Medal, the European, African, Middle Eastern Theater Ribbon with 1 Silver Star Battle Star, the World War II Victory Medal, and 2 Overseas Service Bars. The 137th Infantry was placed on occupation duty at Hanover, Germany, and other areas in Germany before being sent back to France in the fall of 1945 for duty as honor guard to President Truman, making his way to Potsdam. And the troops greatly anticipated the voyage home. Keith was honorably discharged on November 9, 1945 at the Separation Center at Camp Grant, Illinois. He returned to Michigan, where he married Margaret Cross, deceased. They became parents to 3 children: Ann Haskins, deceased, Lynn Livingston, and Paul Bullock, deceased. After divorcing in 1945, Keith married Margie. For the rest of his life, she assisted him in preserving the heritage of the 137th Infantry Regiment with his responsibilities over the years as an officer and member of the 35th Division Association Executive Committee, and as the organizer and sponsor of many 137th Infantry Regimental dinners and reunions. At dinner each year, an interesting speaker was invited. Good feelings prevailed. Following the war and his return to Kalamazoo, Michigan, Keith worked at the W.K. Kellogg Forest, owned by Michigan State University, for 7 years, trying to rid himself of his battle rattles. Then worked at the Upjohn Company in chemical production and material management for 32 years, retiring in 1986. After retirement, Keith and Marge visited the Pacific Northwest, Hawaii, and Alaska, a special time out to visit dear 137th buddies. He did 2 European battlefield tours, including leadership in the 1998 when, with his fellow 35th Division veterans, they retraced their steps in Europe and reserved old friends and renewed old friendships in France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Holland. Truly a highlight. Keith read widely about World War II and shared that knowledge with all who needed help, especially the progeny of the 35th Division vets. He held the position as president of the 137th Infantry Regiment for many years, working closely with his friend, Platoon Sergeant Kenny Faulkner, Company C 137. Keith designated that the reins of the group were taken up by Kenny's granddaughter, Holly Harwell, in whom he had great confidence. Keith Bullock passed away peacefully on December 7th, 2009, Pearl Harbor Day, which was a significant life, which occurred when he was in the 10th grade. A celebration of life service was held for Keith on June 26, 2010, at the Orangeville Township Hall and Veterans Park, Berry County, Michigan, with full military honors by the Otsego Post 3030 of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. There were 2 echoing companies playing taps. Keith was sincerely dedicated to the 35th Division Association and his beloved 137th Infantry Regiment. He and his wife Marge compiled files, photo albums, a large scrapbook, and other documents for his fellow soldiers in the Santa Fe. Most of these are now part of the 35th Division archives in the 35th Division Museum and Library in Topeka, Kansas. They are quality documents prepared with love and dedication, a source of reference, reading enjoyment, and historical research. Near the end of his life, in an email to his friend Kenny Faulkner, he said, "There are 2 things I'm most proud of regarding my 35th experience. 1, I survived. 2, Marge and I brought the 137th Regiment back to the front of the 35th Division."
Keith's wife was unable, lives in Michigan, Marge, and she was unable to travel, so the award will be accepted on her behalf by Colonel Bloomquist.
It's indeed an honor to be able to accept that on behalf of Marge, and I hope she's watching here because I thank her and I blame her for my 15, 16 years of involvement in the association. I sat with them on my first dinner at my first association reunion and truly got hooked in going back every year to see that wonderful generation. Truly an amazing American, an amazing veteran, and certainly a great support of the association. And it's truly an honor for me to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's told by Colonel Boyer that Marge is watching via Zoom up in Michigan, and we are very glad to honor Keith in this way, Marge. It's a distinct honor for the 35th Division Association and one long overdue, if you know, I've told you many times.
Thank you so very much.
Major Norman C. Carey.
Major Norman C. Kerry, an Ohio native, commanded Company A, 320th Infantry Regiment, 35th Infantry Division from December of 1944 until the end of World War II. He was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action at Rheinheim, Germany during the Battle of the Bulge while leading his company in fierce hand-to-hand fighting, including an incident of personal hand-to-hand combat with a German SS sergeant. He received an oblique cluster on the Silver Star when his company, Company A, bore the brunt of an attack on Oversea, Belgium, in which Company A captured an entire enemy battalion. Following World War II, he remained in the U.S. Army Reserve and served as president of the 35th Division Association. He was also inducted into the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame in 2002. Major Kerry was born in Middletown, Ohio on June 8, 1918, the son of Leslie and Mabel Strait Kerry. He graduated from Springfield High School in 1936 and Wittenberg College in 1940. He taught in the Springfield, Ohio school system until he entered the Army on June 9, 1942. He married Mildred Purefield, and they had 9 children: Anne, Frances, Elizabeth, David, Marion, Richard, Jennifer, Daniel, and Kathleen. Inducted into the Army on October 6, 1941 at Fort Hays, Columbus, Ohio. He trained with the 89th Division at Fort Benning, Georgia, where he was commissioned as a second lieutenant after attending Cannon Company Officers School from October 14th to December 7th, 1942, and advanced officer training from September 5th to December 3rd, 1943. He joined the 35th Infantry Division's 320th Infantry Regiment on December 7th as commanding officer of Company A. Less than 2 weeks later, the night of December 18th, during the Battle of Bulge, the 1st Battalion was ordered to attack the town of Rheinheim, Germany. Company A, commanded by Captain Carey, was given the mission of moving into the town following a route along the Blees River. When heavy enemy fire was encountered on the outskirts of the town, he personally reconnoitered a route through enemy lines into the town, where he led his troops in fierce hand-to-hand fighting, forcing the enemy's withdrawal. According to his battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel William Walton, at one point during the fighting, the company commander of Company A, Captain Norman C. Carey, had a hand-to-hand struggle with a German SS sergeant whom he met in the room next to his company command post. The Germans surrendered as a prisoner of war. For his actions during the battle, Captain Carey was awarded the Silver Star Medal for gallantry. The following month, on January 15, 1945, Captain Carey led his troops in a dawn attack on the town of Oversea, Belgium, 4 miles northeast of Bastogne. Upon encountering fierce resistance, he discovered that the town was being held by an enemy battalion that outnumbered his depleted company 3-1. He crossed 1,000 yards of exposed terrain to reach a radio, called for armor support, then returned to his unit to direct the first tank into position, repeatedly exposing himself to withering fire in order to point out targets for tanks and self-propelled guns. The following is from the 320th Infantry's regimental history. Upon the arrival of the supporting tanks, Kerry ran out under fire to direct them, coordinating their attack with that of his infantrymen. The Nazis had orders to resist to the last man, and the Yank riflemen needed to throw more than 150 grenades into the tank-shelled houses. Company A bore the brunt of the attack on Oversea. According to Kerry's battalion commander, due to the sound thinking on the part of the commander of Company A, Captain Norman Carey, his company was able to travel much faster in the deep snow, with the rapid advance surprising the enemy. Company A captured an entire enemy battalion. The German commander's diary had the following pre-dawn entry: "I think I heard Americans coming, but I'm ready." His last entry was, "Soon I shall be a prisoner." Captain Carey was awarded the Silver Star Oakley Cluster for gallantry in action. He was honorably discharged from the Army on January 28, 1946, then graduated from the Michigan University School of Law in 1948. He spent 53 years practicing law in Springfield, Ohio. He was president of the Clark County Bar Association and held leadership positions in numerous civic organizations, including the Masons, Kiwanis Club, and JC. He co-founded several Civil War reenactment groups and was co-chairman of the Clark County, Ohio, American Revolution Bicentennial. He married Mildred Perfield, and they had 9 children: Anne, Francis, Elizabeth, David, Mary, and Richard, Jennifer, Daniel, and Kathleen. Major Kerry passed away on October 19, 2008, and is buried in Ferncliff Cemetery, Springfield, Ohio. Throughout his service in the 35th Infantry Division, Captain Kerry displayed outstanding leadership and a tireless and selfless devotion to duty. After the war, he continued to serve his country in the U.S. Army Reserve and his community involvement in his numerous civic organizations.
Thank you, and we would ask Jennifer Carey Gallo to come forward. This is his daughter.
I have to have my remarks written down. On behalf of the entire Kerry family, and specifically the 9 children of Norman and Mildred Kerry, we thank you for the great honor of selecting Dad for induction into the 35th Division Hall of Fame. We are sincerely moved by this momentous recognition for our own hero, Norman Kerry. Dad would be delighted to be inducted with the likes of heroes Private First Class Bullock, Lieutenant Fling, Major Denny, Captain Hine, and Tech Sergeant Kemper. Every member of the family is full of pride for Dad and full of gratitude to the committee for memorializing his service to our country and his love for the warriors of the 35th Division. You know of his prodigious contributions to the success of Company A, 320th Infantry Regiment's mission during World War II. To his children, he was so much more: father, grandfather, great-grandfather, lawyer and farmer, community leader and band conductor, historian, inspiring speaker, and sometimes humorist, and most important, mentor, coach, counselor, and when necessary, disciplinarian. All 9 of us succeeded in our chosen lives in large part because of Dad's and our mother's encouragement, support, and occasionally tough love. But love always motivated him. We all knew of Dad's enormous love and respect for the Army, and particularly the officers and soldiers of the 35th. For Dad and Mom, a highlight of his later years was the opportunity to attend division reunions. Dad was reticent to tell of his own accomplishment or personal war stories, but he was full of amazing and even amusing stories of his beloved men of Company A. Indeed, his respect for his unit in the 35th Division was a source of study and reflection, resulting in his impressive history of the division in World War II, 1941 to 45, copies of which each of us count as important keepsakes. Dad and the woman who kept him going, Mom, would be bursting with pride and appreciation for your trust in rewarding his magnificent service. Yet we know that in his way, he would attribute his success to his leaders, his non-commissioned officers, and his beloved soldiers. His humility and selflessness are character qualities that typified the great men and women in the Army during the World War II, and most especially in the Santa Fe Division. Thank you, and please allow us to thank each of you for your service.
Our final inductee today is Second Lieutenant John H. Fling, World War I.
I have the honor today to tell the story of a special Second Lieutenant John H. Fling and his courageous actions in World War I. Those courageous actions, actually, as we read the story, are coming as he was an NCO that took over a company as we continue through this. We'll start with the beginning of his life and walk through his accomplishments that are truly fascinating. He was born in 1892 in St. Paul, Minnesota, and that's where he spent his childhood. And then the family moved to St. Joe, Missouri. He joined the Missouri National Guard when he turned age 25. He was a graduate of the Christian Brothers College at St. Joe, Missouri, and prior to enlisting in the National Guard, was an office manager for the Parker Gordon cigar store in St. Louis. This was prior to the United States entry into World War I. The Missouri and Kansas National Guard brigades were inducted into federal service in August of 1917 at Camp Donovan, Oklahoma, and will form the core of the 35th Infantry Division. At the time of induction, Fling was a corporal in Company I, 2nd Missouri Infantry Brigade of the 5th Regiment. He and his unit organized into the 138th Infantry, trained at Camp Donovan, Oklahoma, until the middle of April of 1918, and then they were sent to France. They arrived at Le Havre, France, in May of 1918 and trained until July, when the 35th was sent to the Vosges mountain sector and held in reserve. Lieutenant Fling, at that time, First Sergeant Fling of the 35th Infantry Division, first saw combat in the Moise-Argonne offensive, which was launched at 5:30 a.m. on September 26, 1918. The 35th Division drove north against the German Hindenburg Line, flanked by the 91st Division on its right and the 28th Division on its left. The 138th and the 137th Infantry Regiments were in the main attack force and were supported by the 344th Tank Battalion through the command of Colonel George Patton. During the early stages of the battle, the division fought through heavy fog, machine gun fire, sniper fire, and an artillery barrage. In spite of the obstacles, the 138th, with the support of 6 tanks, captured Cheppy, France that afternoon. The 138th Regiment suffered heavy casualties capturing Cheppy, including many of its officers. John Fling's Company I lost all of its officers, leaving him as the company first sergeant in charge of the unit. He moved Company I out of heavy machine gun fire, regrouped it, and then continued the attack. On September 27th, he suffered a head wound, but remained with the company when they pressed forward over gas terrain. He was unable to wear a gas mask because of his wounds. His leadership under fire and while wounded led to the award of the Distinguished Service Cross on March 28, 1925. The citation reads, Distinguished Service Cross, Cheppy, France, September 26 to 27, 1918. When his company commander was killed and his company left without officers, Sergeant Fling took command of his company, successfully withdrew it from the midst of the machine gun nest, reorganized it, and continued to advance. He was severely wounded in the head, but insisted on remaining on duty with his company and advancing the attack, notwithstanding the fact that the advance was over a gassed area and his wounds kept him from wearing a gas mask. After the war, First Sergeant Fling completed his studies at the Infantry Officer Candidate School in France, making him eligible for appointment to Second Lieutenant of the Infantry. He was promoted in February 1919, and then the 138th Infantry returned to its home station, St. Louis, in April of 1919 and demobilized that May. In addition to the Distinguished Service Cross, Lieutenant Fling was awarded the French Croix de Guerre, Cross of War, the Purple Heart, and the World War I Victory Medal with bars for action at the Mousses-Argonne, Saint Miguel, and the defensive sector. Lieutenant Fling was honorably discharged on May 6, 1919. It described him as brown hair and eyes, fair skin, 5 feet 8 inches tall. He was given a bonus of $60 at the time and was discharged from the United States Army. He returned to St. Louis, where he later married his wife, Ula, and they settled in Kansas City. Together they raised 2 daughters, Carolyn who's Carolyn Fries, and Mary Jane Fling McKim. He was active in his local American Legion post for many years and assisted with organizing the Alexander Skinker American Legion post in St. Louis to honor his commander, who was killed during the six-day battle in the Argonne. He is also, Skinker is also in the 35th Division Hall of Fame. He had a career in sales and co-owned the Central Sales Company and Brookfield Music Company, a company selling records for jukeboxes. He passed away in November of 1972 at the age of 80. Today, he has 6 grandchildren, 8 great-grandchildren, and a growing number of great-great-grandchildren. John Fling's granddaughter, Ginny Lyon, daughter of Carolyn Fling Fries, and her husband, Charles Lyon, proudly display his awards in their home in Lenexa, Kansas. Thank you.
Now we'll have Jenny and your large family to come on up, and Rick, if you're here too, Rick McClellan did the nomination, you want to come up too, that's welcome, so come on up.
Yeah, we brought a crew.
Yeah.
Get the white ones out.
Oh, boy.
Well, on behalf of our family, we are truly honored to have our grandfather receive this nomination and be installed in the Hall of Fame. It really, truly is an honor. And I realize that his service was special. And we do have some of his things displayed in our home, but I really have to thank Rick for educating me and causing me to dig a little deeper in family history to learn some additional things about our grandfather's service. But thank you so much, and we really appreciate this honor. And let me tell you who these people are, though. Because, my sister Amy, and this is my cousin. This is Jim McKim, and his brother Tom McKim on the end, and John McKim, the other brother, and Ben. This is his son. So that they all go together.
Tom looks just like Grandpa.
It is pretty skin they all do. If you
Just
look
to give you a
at,
reference.
yeah, if you look at this photo, you look at it, and the first thing that I thought of was Tom. So it's pretty incredible the reason. And my daughter Kate, two granddaughter, or my grandson and granddaughters, Sabella and Alan. Kate's husband David, and my husband Chuck. So, and Amy's husband Kevin is right here. So that's all of us, all Flings.
Thank you so much, and this concludes the induction part of our ceremony. Because the banquet was canceled this evening, and we usually have the memorial service as part of the banquet, we're going to have the reading of the names of the deceased members of the 35th Division for the last 2 years now by Colonel Pierce. And following the reading of the names, we ask you to rise for the playing of taps, and then that will be followed by the benediction by Chaplain Potter, and then we will also remain standing then for the playing of the Army song. So, Colonel Pierce.
Major General Jack Strukel Jr., Brigadier General Tony Stansberry, Colonel George M. Lynn, Colonel John W. Pat Mitchell Jr., Colonel Joseph Wolfenberger, Colonel Thomas E. Johnson, Colonel Lloyd S. Fry, Lieutenant Colonel Orville L. Henderson, Lieutenant Colonel Terrence Green, Lieutenant Colonel Ron Martin, Major Craig Stewart, CW4 Cornelius Vandermont, Command Sergeant Major Robert Johnson, First Sergeant Tony Salee, Sergeant First Class Gregory L. Dawson, Sergeant First Class Robert Duncan, Staff Sergeant Lewis Hiram James, Tech Sergeant John Francis Walsh, Technical 4 Delbert W. Mully, Thomas A. Cowart, Robert Allen Mott, John J. Zaffatoni Ballardini, William J. Baugh, William Bagua, Marjorie Bush, Anthony S. Massey Jr., Paul Duncan, Lonnie Ray Pressler, Joseph Demler, Glenn Farrell.
Please rise.
Let's go with me in prayer, as if pray in my tradition. Lord, we are mindful today of many incredible stories of service. Those who have earned, again, distinguished service crosses, silver stars, bronze stars, those who have had bodies scarred from the actions of care, concern, and compassion, those who have received the Purple Heart. In John 14, your word shares, greater love has no one than to lay down their life for your friends. Be it in that service, be it in the actual laying down of life, we know that it is an example that comes from above, an example of sacrifice that is shown in heaven. Father God, may we continue to be strengthened by these stories of courage, the example, and the action. Help us to be, again, these people who stand on the shoulders of giants, and through your faith, your encouragement, and the faith that we have, may we again rise to the challenges that we have as a division, as an association, and as a people. All these things we ask in your precious name. Amen.
I have the playing of the Army song. Thank you. You may be seated. Just a couple of announcements. These photos that are in front here will be placed in the 35th Division Hall of Fame tomorrow, which is in the 35th Division Museum in the Museum of the Kansas National Guard in Topeka. We're open 10 to 4 Monday through Saturday, and we're always free, and we encourage you and welcome you to see it. In the packet that the inductees families received, there are some pins, 35th Division Hall of Fame pin, a copy of the bios, and also a PowerPoint, a flash drive with the PowerPoint on it. I want to thank Colonel Waters for doing a great job with the PowerPoint and for the band again, and Colonel Cal Wareham for taking care of refreshments. You're all invited for refreshments back for a reception here, and thank you for joining us on this day. We are dismissed.